Hello and welcome to News Central TV. I'm Darshan Usman. Here are stories making headlines beyond the continent. Now we begin the news with the war in the Middle East, where 3 Palestinian gunmen killed 1 person and wounded 8 in a terror attack on Thursday near a Jewish settlement in the occupied West Bank. Among those wounded was a 23-year-old pregnant woman who was in critical condition. Israeli police said 3 terrorists got out of their vehicle and started shooting automatic weapons at vehicles that were in a traffic jam near the Ma'ale Adumim settlement on the road towards Jerusalem. The police further said the terrorists were neutralized. Violence was already on the rise across the West Bank prior to the Gaza war sparked by Hamas' October 7 attack, but has escalated since then to levels unseen in nearly 2 decades, with hundreds killed in recent months. Meanwhile, Israel launched airstrikes Thursday on southern Gaza's Rafah after threatening to send troops against Hamas militants in the city, where around 1.4 million Palestinians have sought refuge. Global powers trying to find a way to end the Israel-Hamas war have so far failed, but a U.S. envoy was expected in Israel on Thursday in the latest attempt to secure a truce deal. International concern has spiraled over Gaza's high civilian death toll and the dire humanitarian crisis sparked by the war that followed Hamas's October 7 attack against Israel. More than 4 months of relentless fighting and bombardment have flattened much of the Hamas-run coastal territory and pushed its population of around 2.4 million to the brink of famine. Let's also tell you that relatives of 2 Lebanese shepherds killed in Israeli shelling near the border gathered for their funeral in Al-Wazani. Since the outbreak of war between Hamas and Israel on October 7, the Lebanese-Israeli border has witnessed a near-daily exchange of fire between Israel's army and Lebanon's Shiite movement Hezbollah, a Hamas ally.
الوزاني خرج بلد الوزاني عمل العدو الاسرائيلي بتويسهم دمباري ولا نهايتهم يا جماعه الشباب عملوا الميزه وقتلوا على المنطقه الوزاني الشريطه يعني منطقه الوزاني خرج الوزاني استشهدوا شباب 2 شاب عمره 18 شاب عمره 30 سنه بعد مريحين شباب ونقتلهم بدم بارد يعني مش ما في اكثر من هيك غدر وهيك.
We head now to America, where voters in the Arab American majority city of Dearborn in the U.S. swing state of Michigan have vowed to defeat U.S. President Joe Biden in the upcoming Democratic primary election over his continued support of Israel's war against Palestinian militant group Hamas and the conflict's soaring civilian death toll. A progressive activist and co-chair of an initiative called Abandon Biden, Samra'a Lukman, has urged voters not to cast their ballots for the Democratic president.
For the betrayal that he's done to me and all the community members that have voted for him. He won these 2 precincts by 90% in 2020. And by God, this time he's going to win by 0. I'm going to make sure he gets 0%. So the only way I would vote for Biden is if he resurrected all 30,000 people that were dead. We are not going to be voting for Biden. It's an abandon Biden campaign that is not just to abandon him, but to oust him from office.
احنا عادة في الحزب الديمقراطي لنا من 50 سنة. مثلا أنا اشتغلت في فرد ومع نقابة العمال ونحن كأعضاء داخل الحزب، لكن نحن الآن نختلف مع سياسة الحزب.
Now, President Biden, in his seemingly unlimited funding and support for Netanyahu's war, he is threatening to lose this community, perhaps not just in November, but perhaps for a generation to come. That's why people like me and organizers like me here in Southeastern Michigan are coming together and insisting that he hear us, are coming together and voting uncommitted on February 27th, so that he sees the warning signs, because it's clear he hasn't heard us yet. He'll hear us at the ballot box on February 27th.
It's a lose-lose situation. I'm looking at 2 candidates that I don't agree with who have both done things to go against the Muslim population. I think I'm going to choose the lesser evil. And to me, at this point, the lesser evil is Trump.
Still in the country, a ruling from the Alabama Supreme Court that frozen embryos are considered children and that a person could be held liable for accidentally destroying them has opened up a new front in the U.S. battle over reproductive medicine. The southern U.S. state's largest hospital has passed its in-vitro fertilization, that's IVF services, in the wake of the decision, over fears that it could expose them to criminal prosecution. Medical experts and reproductive advocacy groups warned the ruling could have negative consequences for fertility treatments in Alabama and beyond. However, conservative groups welcomed the ruling, arguing that even the tiniest embryo deserved legal protection. Joining us now to give us more insight is our international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Now, Afia, why did this lawsuit even come about? How did it come about, and what did the court rule?
And that's a very good question. How did we get to this point? Well, this all started in 2020 when 3 couples at an IVF clinic unluckily lost their embryos. What happened was a patient managed to wander into the area where the embryos are kept, handled them, and destroyed them. So 3 couples lost their embryos that were being kept in this fertility center. Now they sued the fertility center and sued the Center for Reproductive Medicine and Mobile Infirmary Association. And this was under a wrongful death suit. And it was wrongful death of a minor. And to do that, they had to rule that an embryo is a person because it didn't specifically cover embryos that were being used for IVF. So the court, in a lower court in Alabama, initially ruled that embryos were not people, they were not human, they were not children. But this court has overturned that decision and has decided that embryos are in fact people, are in fact children, can be considered children, and this wrongful death suit can be brought and applies to all unborn children regardless of their location.
All right, so what are the implications of this ruling for Alabama fertility patients?
Well, at the moment, this ruling doesn't ban or restrict IVF in any way, shape, or form. But if you are ruling that embryos are children and are people, this could have an effect on the way that embryos are stored. For instance, if they have to be stored at very low temperatures, you can't store a person at extremely low temperatures. That could be considered cruel or unusual punishment. Therefore, you can't do that to a person. Therefore, you can't do that to an embryo. So how do you store the embryos? It also could apply to the way the embryos are implanted or the way that IVF is carried on. Could be deemed as cruel and unusual punishment to a person. It could apply to an embryo. So at the moment, it means that IVF is halted while they try and figure out the nuances of how you're going to store and go about IVF if an embryo is considered a person. And then if you have this effect on IVF, if it's stopped at the moment, you know, IVF can be sometimes the only way that people can build their families. So it means that people are in limbo. Now, the Medical Association of the state of Alabama said in a statement, the significance of this decision impacts everybody in Alabama and will likely lead to fewer babies. Children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and cousins, as fertility options become limited for those who want to have a family.
All right, so Afia, let's talk about how this actually correlates with the U.S. abortion debate. Where is the tie there?
Well, Roe versus Wade, which was the rule that gave anybody the right to an abortion, was overturned in 2022. And that led to some states banning abortion altogether, which is what happened in Alabama, and some states opening up more widely. And now you're going to have people who perhaps see embryos as children, taking that as pro-life and taking that under their wing, and people who perhaps don't, who are part of the pro-abortion lobby. It's a bit of a grey area at the moment, but we know that when it comes to abortion, this is a hot topic, and especially as we are in an election year, more people are going to be seeing if this rule could happen anywhere else in the United States and what it means for people who are trying to build their families and for reproductive rights.
All right, just before we let you go, Afia, how could this ruling affect U.S. politics?
Well, like I said, when it comes to abortion and reproductive rights, that's an extremely hot button topic and something that lots of people will build their vote on. As we know, the Republicans, the GOP, the right wing of politics are very much pro-life. And then you have the Democrats on the left who are very much pro-abortion, that reproductive rights should be for everyone. Nikki Haley has come out and said that she thinks embryos are babies. She said, when you talk about an embryo, you're talking to me, that's life. And I do see where that's coming from when they talk about that. Nikki Haley, of course, is a Republican or trying to be a Republican candidate. So already she's sort of nailed her flag to the mast on that, where she stands on that she sees embryos as babies. I can see this being taken up into the discussion around reproductive rights, the discussion around pro-life and pro-abortion, the two camps, and I can see that will be, again, tied in with such a hot button topic as we go into this election cycle.
All right, well, thank you so much, Afia, for speaking to us on this. And now we move to South America, where the Argentine government has resolved to close the National Institute Against Discrimination, Xenophobia and Racism. Presidential spokesperson Manuel Adorni, at a press conference, said the decision was made to move forward with the dismantling of institutes that serve absolutely no purpose. According to its latest report, the organization, with offices throughout the national territory and a staff of 400 employees, receives an average of 2,500 complaints a year for discrimination.
Estamos dando los primeros pasos para avanzar en el desmantelamiento de diferentes institutos que efectivamente no sirven o no sirven absolutamente para nada, o son grandes cajas de la política, o son simplemente lugares para generar empleo militante. La verdad es que nos encantaría que el INADI esté cerrado hoy. Eso no puede ocurrir precisamente por estos tiempos, pero a partir de hoy, si se quiere, empezamos con todas las actuaciones administrativas que haya que hacer.
We go on a short break now. More stories after we return. Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now the news continues in Europe, where the mother of Alexei Navalny says that she's being pressured into agreeing to a secret burial for her son, accusing Russian authorities of blackmail. Navalny, an anti-corruption crusader and leading domestic foe of Russian President Vladimir Putin, died last Friday, aged 47, in an Arctic prison. Meanwhile, exiled Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya on Thursday urged democratic governments to make Navalny's death a red line with actions and not just words of support.
Мне сразу были отдать тело Алексея, но они не сделали это до сих пор. Вместо этого они шантажируют меня, ставят мне условия, где, когда и как должен быть похоронен Алексей. Это незаконно. При мне им приходят приказы то ли из Кремля, то ли из Центрального аппарата Следственного комитета. Они хотят, чтобы это было сделано тайно, без прощания. Они хотят привести меня на окраину кладбища, к свежей могиле и сказать, вот здесь лежит ваш сын. Я на это не согласна.
Away from that story, Albania's parliament on Thursday approved a controversial deal signed with Italy to host 2 holding centers for migrants rescued in Italian waters. The deal, which required a simple majority approval, passed with the backing of 77 MPs of the 140-seat parliament, with the opposition boycotting the vote. Prime Minister Edi Rama said in a post on social media that Albania is standing together with Italy by choosing to act like an EU member state. He said Tirana was helping share a burden that Europe should face united as a whole family. The agreement has been regularly denounced by opposition parties in both countries, as well as by rights groups, resulting to a legal challenge taken up by Albania's top court in Tirana. We now head to Oceania, where hot and windy conditions has sparked warnings for out-of-control blazes burning in Australia's southeastern state of Victoria. Now, around 1,000 firefighters were battling a fire near Raglan, a small town about 150 kilometers northwest of Melbourne, which has triggered evacuation notices for residents amid warnings of worsening conditions.
Real worried. Yeah, I can't think. I'm just sort of, I got that real sick in my tummy. Already done that. My daughter and husband, and she's taking the kids. I've just taken my bike into Beaufort, but it doesn't look too good in Beaufort.
The chairman of the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on China has warned Beijing that any attempt to invade Taiwan would fail. U.S. Representative Mike Gallagher told the island's president-elect Lai Ching-te during a meeting at the presidential office.
And in a bipartisan fashion is that if Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party were to ever make the incredibly foolish decision to attempt an invasion of Taiwan, that effort would fail.
特别是中国在外交、国防、政治、经济各个面向，都展现他们强大的对国际社会的压力。台湾面临这样的挑战，我们除了坚定的以和平、对等、民主、对话4个原则处理两岸的关系以外，我们也会强化我们国防国安的力量，来向国际社会传达台湾守护自己国家的决心。
The United States, Democrats and Republicans stands with Taiwan for your freedom and for ours. For as Taiwan goes, so goes the world. Taiwan must remain, as it stands today, a candle, burning freely, fiercely, and improbably against the darkness.
In the meantime, China on Thursday condemned a U.S. delegation visit to Taiwan as interference after the chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on China arrived on the self-ruled island with 4 other lawmakers. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning told a press conference that China resolutely opposes any form of official exchange between the United States and Taiwan authorities under any pretext.
分割的一部分，中方一贯坚决反对美方同台湾当局进行任何形式的官方往来，坚决反对美方以任何方式、任何借口干涉台湾事务。我们敦促美方务必认清台湾问题的极度复杂性和敏感性，切实恪守一个中国原则和中美3个联合公报规定，慎重妥善处理涉台问题，停止美台官方往来，停止向台独分裂势力发出任何错误信号。
But let's also tell you that 2 people were killed and 3 others missing after a cargo ship struck a bridge in southern China on Thursday and caused part of it to collapse. The empty container vessel was traveling between Foshan and Guangzhou when it rammed into the Lijinsha Bridge at around 5:30 a.m. local time when a container ship hit the pier of the Lijinshan Bridge in Nansha district. 5 vehicles, including a motorbike, were involved in the accident. 2 of them plunged into the river and the others fell onto the vessel, a preliminary investigation has found. A crew member is slightly injured in the incident. Rescue efforts are underway and the cause of the accident is being investigated. Meanwhile, China says it has signed agreements to send pandas to a zoo in San Diego after nearly all the beloved black and white animals on loan in the United States were returned during years of diplomatic tensions. Now, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning told a press briefing that Chinese institutions have already signed agreements with the San Diego Zoo in the U.S. She said the agreement centered on a new round of cooperation in giant panda protection. A deal was also signed with a zoo in Madrid and Beijing. Beijing is in talks with zoos in Washington and Vienna, she added. China has long deployed the fluffy envoys to various countries as panda diplomacy, often to further its foreign policy aims.
了解呢，中方的有关机构已经分别同西班牙的马德里动物园和美国的圣迭戈动物园就新一轮的大熊猫国际保护合作事宜签署了协议，同时也在同美国的华盛顿国家动物园。
Now we move to India, where angry farmers have pledged to continue their protest following deadly violence after authorities thwarted their attempt to march to New Delhi to press for their demands for higher crop prices.
पीसफुल ही हमने ऐलान किया था, लेकिन सरकार ने एकदम ऐसे बिहेव कर दिया जैसे कि हम किसी और स्टेट के मतलब किसी दुश्मन देश के लोग होते हैं। हम खेती को अच्छे गवर्नमेंट बोल रही है विभिन्नता, हम बोल रहे हैं आप एमएसपी दो, विभिन्नता खुद ब खुद इससे आ जाएगी।
3 किलोमीटर पाकिस्तान का बॉर्डर है हमारा, ठीक है। उधर भी बॉर्डर है साढ़े, इधर दिल्ली जा रहे हैं, इधर भी बॉर्डर किया है। साडा रास्ता इन्ना कटिया है, असी नहीं कटिया। सानू
Residents of Barcelona react to 4.5 years prison sentence handed down to former football icon Dani Alves. A Spanish court on Thursday found Alves guilty of raping a young woman at a Barcelona nightclub in December 2022. It also ordered the 3-time Champions League winner to 5 years probation after he serves his jail term and demanded he pay 150,000 euros in compensation to the victim. Alves, who maintains the sex with the woman was consensual, will appeal the ruling, his lawyer told reporters outside the court.
4 años es muy poco para el daño moral que le hizo a ella, tanto moral como físico, entonces creo que 20 años tal vez o más. Creo que es muy injusto. Me imagino que la familia de ella debe estar sufriendo mucho y de verdad lo siento mucho por ella y por todo eso que ha pasado y lo veo como una injusticia.
Que ser más, porque el daño que le han hecho a esta chica no es de 4 años, será de más. Por lo tanto, siempre es corta. Tiene que ser equiparable a lo que le han hecho a ella. Él en 4 años estará en la calle y ella en 4 años no sabrá.
And that's all on Beyond the Continent. Send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen. Do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I'm Darshan Usman.